Hi everybody, I'm Kathy, I'm an addict.
Hey, Kathy.
The honor's mine. I can't believe there's this many people here on a Friday afternoon. There's usually like 10 people here. I don't know what happened. Word must have caught on, or it must not be raining in 40 degrees like it usually is down here. I keep watching the sun to see when it's going to go down, because as soon as I get brain freeze, I won't be able to talk. I can't take the cold. I'm going to keep it kind of short on the qualifying part. Don't need to go into all that. I was sharing with a friend of mine that if I make it to this year's clean birthday, that I'll have just as much time clean as I did using, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. But just to qualify myself, I've been told, I went out on this blind date a couple years ago, and this guy says, he goes, "You look like a prissy little school teacher." And I sat there and thought, okay, you have no idea what you're in for. So just to qualify myself, since I look like a prissy little school teacher, like, I don't know, probably a lot of you here, I grew up in addiction, dysfunction, and if you come from that, you know that nothing is ever what it seems, and one day this is okay, and the next day it's not, and so there's this mistrust that develops, and there's this walking on eggshells problem, and there's life is real confusing, and nothing really makes any sense. And usually when a person comes from that type of environment, they learn, like I did from a very early age, that in order to solve the conflict, in order to make sense of the confusion, there's one thing that really works. Myself, I can remember being a young child and laying in bed, and I had these really bizarre prayers, because we did, we were raised up in church, and that didn't make sense to me either at the time. But I had these weird prayers like, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. I don't want to go through this anymore. And if you're a lady in the program, like about 80% of the ladies in this program, a lot of us come from physical and sexual abuse. We have issues with that, but you can recover from it. It's possible. So at about the age of 11, I started using, and looking back on it, today I say that I am grateful for that, because it saved my life. I am grateful for finding what I found, because it worked at the time. And I learned that as time went on, that it worked better, and it worked better, and every time there was a problem, it solved the problem. At least I thought it did. But I really don't believe that I would be here today if I hadn't picked up. I really don't believe that. I think I would have found a way out of that life, and it wouldn't have, it wouldn't have been good. So as things progressed, like most things do, it quit working for me. I started getting in a lot of trouble. I guess now that I'm older, I can look back and say, compared to a lot of people in the program, I got clean at an early age. And that's probably a good thing, because I remember my last year of high school, I had to use when I got up in the morning, or I'd shake really bad. So, and I said to myself, oh my God, I'm turning into that. Oh my God. So I did the thing that any good addict would do. I found something else. And what I found was the thing that all addicts stereotype. And I work with addicts, and they always say to me, when they're telling their little histories and their little stories, they always say, and I did this, 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 but I've never shot dope. I've never used a needle. And I said, oh, what does that have to do with anything? A drug is a drug is a drug is a drug. What does that have to do with anything? Well, And I'd say, well, what does that mean? Like, once you do that, you're just hopeless, and you might as well just go in a corner and die? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, so, being the good addict I was, I switched over and started living that lifestyle. And being that there's children here, I won't go into great detail about that, but let's just put it this way. When it's costing you $3,000 a week to take care of your problem, you find some ways to take care of your problem. And I don't have to go into great detail as to what those things are. I think you can use your imagination there. And that gets real old, real fast, and you'll start looking real old and looking like you're dying real fast. But that went on for me personally for about 6 years. Okay? That was inpatient, outpatient, no patient, this methadone clinic, that methadone clinic, whatever. You know, I've been formally kicked out of places that I now work, so, you know, that tells you something. And, you know, as my disease progressed, I had to keep, you know how when your disease progresses, you usually head east or west. I don't know why it's, well, it's sometimes north or south. But I headed west, ended up in Chicago, went and did that thing for a while. Went everywhere, actually. I think in the last 2 years of my addiction, I hit 37 states and didn't leave a good impression on any of them. So that was, you know, that was my life. I guess there was a lot of times when I would be in a treatment center, or I would be in a lockup, or I would be somewhere, and I just knew there was just no hope for me, okay? I would be saying that same prayer, kicking it in some inpatient or psych unit or whatever. I'd be laying there with that same doggone prayer when I was 11 years old. Don't let me wake up. I can't do this anymore. Because it quit working.
All right.
I don't care. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I know in my using, I got to the point where they just didn't make enough anymore to make the pain go away. I don't care how much money I spent. I couldn't even get to the point where I could even successfully overdose myself, because I'd always snap out of it somehow, because we have this tolerance that shouldn't even be existent. And I'd be at the point where that didn't even make it go away anymore. They just didn't make enough for me to not hurt anymore. And so I'm living in Chicago, I'm going to this clinic, and I kept hearing this guy. I'd always like sit outside his office, because he was a African American guy with this really loud voice, and he was a counselor at this place I was going, and I never listened to those people because they don't know nothing. So I'd sit outside the door of his office, and he'd be hollering at one of his clients, and he'd be saying, "Now you know you need to go to the NA meetings. You need to go to the NA meetings." And I thought, yeah, that stuff doesn't work. So what happened, I don't know, must be a God thing or something. My sister was also an addict like me, and she had accrued some 26 or 27 felonies all on the same day, and got court ordered before her little trial thing to go to the 12-step program. I said, "Oh, I've been to those things before. I'll take it. They don't work. Don't worry. You won't have to quit using." So I started doing my community service or whatever by taking my sister to meetings, and I'd never been to NA before. Okay, I'd been to other 12-step programs, and the people there, to me, just seemed like they had never been where I'd been. They never talked like the life that I was living. I just couldn't relate. I couldn't identify. For God's sakes, they had jobs. I mean, come on, they had cars that they bought. So, you know, I don't know. It didn't work for me. So I started taking my sister to these meetings, and eventually that wore off, and but by that time I find out that I'm pregnant, okay? And I don't know if any female here has been through this, but I quit going to the meetings. I was pregnant, and I couldn't stop using. I could not stop using, and the guilt from that kept me away for a while. But I got to tell you, that was the end for me. That was the end. I was pregnant. I was committing the most hideous of crimes. I was using more than I ever used in my life. And when I gave birth to this child, he was strung out worse than anything I'd ever seen in another human being. And by some weird mistake, he had been in the hospital for about a month, and by some weird mix-up, I went to go pick him up from the hospital, and the welfare people were supposed to go get him, and they made a mistake and released him to me, and had to take him home. And I took him home, and this kid went through withdrawals for 6 frickin' months. 6 months. And I watched that, and it dispelled for me the myth forever that I'm only hurting myself. Because my whole addiction was based on the fact that I don't want to live, and I'm only hurting myself. And that is the biggest lie there is, because my addiction hurts everybody. And mind you, I had already lost one child before that, was taken away by her father. So this was my second time around. And I watched that for 6 months. I went back to the meetings, and I got clean. I didn't come in there with a bright, shiny attitude. I didn't even talk. I went to NA when there was only like 4 or 5 people at each meeting, and I don't even think we saw a copy of the basic text for like 6 months. I think we were using somebody else's literature or something, and somebody from Kalamazoo came down about had a heart attack and said, "Don't you have a basic text? That's not the right book." So I'd never seen one. And I knew when I read that basic text that somebody was following me around and writing that book, because that was me. And I just kept going back. I mean, we didn't even have an area then. We had to drive to, I don't know where, 100 miles away. I've got 30 days clean. I'm detoxing off of methadone. I'm in these meetings, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to be the GSR?" "Yeah, okay." You know, we only have like 5 people at the meeting, and everyone has a position. You know, we were just... So I'd go to these area meetings, and these people would have like 2 years clean, and I'm like, oh my God, you know. And I'm still, I mean, I'm kicking methadone like the first 6 months I'm in NA, so I didn't think clearly anyway. And they just, I guess that was a good thing, because it kept me clean. I mean, in order to go to a meeting, an area meeting, in order to go to anything, we had to drive 50 or 100 miles. We'd go to, oh, there's a dance in Gary tonight, there's a dance in Merrillville, there's a dance somewhere. We'd go. We'd take, you know, we'd get in these addicts in cars that had no treads on the tires, no one had a license, no insurance. We had nothing, and we didn't care. We were just happy to go be in NA, you know. We were just gung-ho on everything. You know, we'd sell food stamps for gas, you know. We didn't have anything. And it was, and you know what, that was back in the day when, you know, that was just the big deal to be clean, you know. That's, I mean, I tell people they come in the program and they're like, they got 30 days and they're talking about, you know, I got to go and get this big job, and you know, I have to do this and I have to be responsible. For God's sakes, I didn't think about getting a job till I had 4 years clean, and my sponsor's like, "Don't you think you need a job?" And I go, "Why? This seems to work for me." It was just, I don't know, we were just kind of, since NA was new to us, it had only been around for, I think the oldest meeting in the town where I got clean, Elkhart, had only been around for 2 years. And it was kind of well, I don't want to use any profanity. It was kind of a mix of this fellowship and that fellowship, and, you know, it was just different than it is now. You didn't have those people that were, you know, you'd come in and they'd have all this time. They were from a different program, so it was just kind of odd. And I remember just thinking that these people with 2 and 3 years were just gurus, and you know, and just all of us getting through it. Oh, another day clean. It was wonderful. And you know, we had our ups and downs, and I'll tell you mine. I got my first year clean, and believe me, like I said, I didn't come from, you know, way up here. When I got my first year clean, the gentleman I was married to at the time had gotten sentenced to prison on the same day, and I went and collected my 1-year token, just complaining up a storm. I had no gratitude, and I don't even think I worked the steps with a sponsor who was kind of, didn't really know the program that well, but you know what, I got the year clean, and I didn't know what a gift that was. 30 days later, I got sick, and I didn't know what it was, but I ended up in the hospital right around Christmas time, and I didn't come out for 3 months. And I had some weird gallbladder liver problem, and they botched the surgery, and I almost died. And I remember coming home from the hospital. I was too sick to get up out of bed, and somebody knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and these people came in, and they said, "We're moving the Saturday night meeting over here." And they had the Saturday night meeting. They dragged me out of my room, put me in the living room. We had it in my living room. And you guys have no idea how much that means to somebody. I can tell you that just staying clean the first 2 years of my recovery was the only thing I was capable of doing at the time. I could not, there were times that first 2 years of my recovery, I could not leave my house. I had panic attacks, I had depression, I had all these issues that addicts have. And I had a really difficult time living in society because of how I'd lived the previous years. I didn't know what was right, I didn't know how to act. I always said cuss words. And I just had a really hard time. At 2 years clean, I found myself sitting up in my bedroom with a gun sticking in my mouth because I never worked on myself. You know, I'd worked the steps, but I never took a really deep look at myself, my self-esteem, being a woman in the program, and at that time it was mostly, there was very few women like there is now, and back in those days I was very externalized about what everyone else thought, and I had such a moment of low self-esteem. And my son, the baby I'm telling you about, knocked on the door and he said, "Mom." And I had snapped out of myself, and I said, "You know what, from this moment on, I'm working on me, and this is over with." You know, I don't know about you, but so many of us, and all the dysfunction that went on in my growing up years, we had one motto in my family, and it was, don't think, don't feel, and for God's sakes, don't tell. And I carried that into my early recovery, thinking, everybody else out here, they're looking at me. There was nothing coming from in here. This is why these steps are so important to me, and this is when I really started working these steps. It was all about you. What did you think of me? Oh my gosh, you don't live in the right house. You don't drive the right car. You don't have the right job. No. I had to work these steps for me, because when you read in the basic text where it says, when at the end of the road we find that we can no longer live as a human being, either with or without the use of drugs. Did you hear that? Yeah. With or without the use of drugs. Here I'm 2 years clean, and I'm back to wanting to die again because I didn't do the work here where it needed to be done. I didn't make myself feel worthy of staying clean for, staying alive for, being a good mother for, because I was so worried about I just wasn't good enough. And I said, you know what? That's over with. I am good enough, and I'm going to do something about it. Okay? I got serious. I got a different sponsor. I started working the steps seriously. I went back to school. I actually got a job. Yay! I worked, I went to school, and I did it for almost 10 years. Worked a full-time job, went to school, and ladies, I kept the men out of my life. And I don't mean nothing against men, I mean relationships. When I think about how much energy I used to put in to what this person or that person or this guy or this relationship meant to me, I said, oh my gosh, think of the things you could accomplish. And my sponsor at the time, who had 23 years, said, you're going to give me 2 years of commitment to yourself You're not going to get in any relationships, and you're going to work these steps. And guess what? I listened. For the first time in my life, I listened. I worked these steps with my sponsor, and the 2 years turned into 5. Yes, people, outside of prison, you can go 5 years without a relationship. But I can tell you, they should give out coins for it. I wanted a coin. And with that energy that I used to put into all of what you thought about me, I ended up with 3 college degrees, graduating in the top 10 of my class, raising my kids, and I can't say I did a really successful job with that, but I did the best I could at the time, which is what everybody does. It just, I guess my sponsor had me really stop and think about, through these steps, where all my energy was going to and where to focus it at the time and what I really wanted. My sponsor, I'll tell you why I picked my sponsor. I picked my sponsor because she was loving, caring, and compassionate, and like me, has a severely handicapped son due to their addiction. Okay? My son is handicapped. In '96, I was driving my son up to Ann Arbor Neurological Center, and I thought, okay, at that time he was 8 years old, and I thought, okay, you're going to have to tell him. You're going to have to tell him why you're doing this and why he has to go through all this stuff. You're just going to have to tell him, okay? So we're on the interstate, and I'm driving my usual 110, and I told him, I said, the reason that we're doing all this is because when I was pregnant with you, I used so many drugs, and I hurt you. And I don't know if you can ever forgive me for that, but I need to tell you that this is why you are the way you are. And so we're driving, it's dead silence. He's sitting there thinking about it, and I'm like, having I had tears running down my face in the car. And then he just puts his little hand on my leg and goes, "It's okay, Mom, I love you." And to this day, my son's 15 years old now, and to this day, he never brings it up. He's on a lot of medication, he's got a lot of difficulties, a lot of handicaps, but not once, regardless of how angry he gets at me, because I'm his mom and I tell him no all the time, so of course he's going to be angry with me, he has never said to me once, "I'm this way because of you." Not one time. And I am truly, I can't even tell you. Does anybody here have a Just for Today book with them? Anybody got one? There is this meditation in here. Let me find it. There it is. I got most of them memorized. All right. Okay, this is how I feel. It's back in February, but this is how I feel most of the time, most every day. Active addiction was no picnic. Many of us barely came out alive. But ranting against the disease, lamenting what it has done to us, pitying ourselves for the condition it has left us in, these things can only keep us locked in a spirit of bitterness and resentment. The path to freedom and spiritual growth begins where bitterness ends, with acceptance. There is no denying the suffering brought by addiction. Yet it was this disease that brought us to Narcotics Anonymous. Without it, we would neither have sought nor found the blessing of recovery. In isolating us, it forced us to seek fellowship. In causing us to suffer, it gave us the experience needed to help others. Help no one else was so uniquely suited for. In forcing us to our knees, addiction gave us the opportunity to surrender to the care of a loving higher power. We would not wish the disease of addiction on anyone, but the fact remains that we addicts already have this disease, and further, that without this disease, we may never have embarked on our spiritual journey. Thousands of people search their whole lives for what we have found in the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. Fellowship, a sense of purpose and a conscious contact with a higher power. Today, we are grateful for everything that has brought us this blessing. And that explains how I feel. You know, most days I wake up and I'm so overwhelmed with gratitude, I could just cry. I don't have everything. You know, I don't have money, property, and prestige. And I don't want it because I'd be a dangerous human being with it. But I am so blessed in my life. And it's because of this fellowship. I could sit and cry about a lot of things, and that's a god-awful, horrible sight to watch, me in self-pity. And I don't have, you know, people can look at my life and say, God, I couldn't spend a week in your life. It's kind of chaotic sometimes, but I don't feel that way. I most certainly do not feel that way. I have so much gratitude for my life. You know, sometimes I wake up in a lot of pain. I don't know if a lot of people here have this or if it's a big issue in your area where you're from, but most of us who did the IV thing, most of us are suffering with this this hepatitis thing, and I go through a lot of pain with that and some sickness, and my son's father is just being put on the transplant list for it now because they can't help him. He's going to die, and that's okay. I still have gratitude. I couldn't imagine feeling sorry for myself. Not after what this fellowship and this and my higher power has done for me. I just couldn't imagine it. And I sometimes I wonder about, you know, I'm watching him go through what he's going through, and I'm thinking, okay, well, you know, you're next. But I don't think that. I wake up every day and I'm grateful for every day that I have. And I learned through this program that my perception of everything is how it is. How I perceive it, that's how I define it. You know, if I want to perceive, well, I have this child that's a, you know, 6'3", 225-pound handful, you know, I have this problem, I have that problem, I have to work 3 jobs to pay my bills. Well, actually my student loans from going to college. It's okay, because I'm able to do it, and I'm grateful. I just want to briefly share with you a spiritual experience I had right here at this campground in 1992. That was 92, wasn't it, Mark? Huh? Yeah, it's 11 years, right? It had to be 92. Yeah, it was 92. I don't know if you guys been coming to this convention for a long... Who's been here like all the times? 2 people? Yeah. We were just talking about that earlier. This area had what, about 10 or 12 people in it, and and this convention, it was alleged to be kind of a self-will thing put on by a couple of addicts, and I don't know if you guys know this, but the first year that this little thing went on here, it was snowing, it was freezing rain, and it was 40 degrees out, and there was 39 people here. And we had signed this contract to pay them $10,000 for renting this camp. Okay? So people came, and we were, you know, we were all grandiose. We had to get like the main big guy from NA to fly in, and well, I don't want to spill names or anything, to come in. We had these big people from New York or where, all these people were here, and there was like maybe 10 people from our area here. So we had a great time, and the thing was over, and here we are with like $2,800, and we had signed our names in this contract, and we didn't have any money. And so we had to go pay the people. And we're like, we don't have the money. You know, what are you going to do? We don't have the money. You know, and if we were using it, it wouldn't be a problem because we'd come up with some story and promise them and we'd leave. We'd run the scam on them. So we're like shaking, you know, going in there with this, me and this other addict, we're like, where are you getting this little money? And they're going to kick us out and tell us never to come back. And we go in there, and the people that run this place, he's looking at it, he's looking at us, he's looking at it, he's looking at us, and we're just dying, right? And he says, don't worry about it, you come back next year? And we just busted out crying, and that's all there was to do. I think it was out of relief that we weren't going to jail or something. Like, oh, I don't have any, because we didn't have any money. But when I come back here every year, and I see how much this thing has grown, and these kids here, it's so cool that people bring kids. Because you know what? I have a 20-year-old daughter who was raised up in Narcotics Anonymous for the most part. The one that I got taken away, well, I got back. So, anyway, she's 20 now. And my kids have been raised in Narcotics Anonymous, and you know what they know from that? Something that they don't learn out there in society. They have learned how much fun you can have, and you never have to use. They don't use. My son's 15 and my daughter's 20, and they don't use. And they didn't learn that anywhere else. They learned that here, because you know that we live in a society that tells us every time we turn around in every magazine, every newspaper, and on every TV station that you cannot have fun unless you use. And the only way to change that is to prove it and not say it. Because you can't sit there with a drink in your hand and a joint in this hand and this over here and that over there and say, no kids, using is a bad idea. And I'm so grateful that this has turned into an event that people can bring their families to and teach their children from a very early age. You don't have to use to have a good time. I am so grateful to Narcotics Anonymous for my family, for the life that I have, and for what you guys have given me. And I'm grateful to be able to share that with you and to be at this convention this year. I didn't come for the last couple of years because the last person that I come to this convention with 3 years ago, and I've always been on the committee and I've always been a part of, and it's always meant a lot to me, isn't with us here today, although I am wearing this nice piece of jewelry that this person did buy for me because they didn't make it out of their addiction. And I couldn't come back. Somebody I was very close to took their own life, and I just couldn't come back. And I felt like a big idiot for doing that, for not coming, but I didn't want to spend the whole weekend just sobbing, crawling around on the ground, or, you know, I just couldn't do it. But, you know what? It takes what it takes. And grief is a very strange thing, and I think most of you know that. Because in this disease, if you stay around this program long enough, you will stay around. You will see people from your tables, people from these conventions, and people that you dearly love with all your heart die. And whatever you need to do to get through that without using, do it. If you need to not go somewhere, if you need to stay in bed and cry that weekend, whatever you need to do, it's okay. Just don't pick up. So I did what I needed to do, and I'm grateful to be back here, and I love this place, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.